We are going to focus on one. All right. Even as a study skills tutor, I teach 7, but there is one strategy I can pretty much guarantee that your child in middle school, high school, college is not using on that test. And it doesn't matter if we're talking like a final exam, the cumulative end of semester test, or if we're talking that really hopefully simple multiple choice test. There is a strategy that your teen needs to know. And I gotta tell you, the strategy is really simple and it's really important, but yet it's the one when I teach test taking strategies, teens don't use. And this strategy is literally to talk to the teacher. All right, that is the most underused strategy when it comes to tests. The child wants to ace that test, wants to get that best score possible. If he's allowed to talk to the teacher during a test, your child needs to talk to the teacher during the test if he has questions, if he needs help. Let's talk about it more. Before we jump in, though, do you know I'm Jessyka Coulter, CEO and founder of Ace Cookie Tutoring. I am a study skills expert. I teach teens how to learn through study skills. There is a huge difference between knowing the content and then doing well on a test. And we can talk about that more. If you've got questions for me, let me know down below. But if you are here because you want your teen to love learning, you are here because you want to help your teen do better on that next test, be sure to subscribe. Be sure to click that bell to turn on notifications. Now, before your teen shows up for that test, he needs to gather some information. All right. You might be going, Jessyka, okay, talking to the teacher during a test sounds like an awesome strategy. Like, okay, maybe it's something I want my son, my daughter to do before, that next test, or maybe even during that final. But how does it work? Like, how do I know my child can actually do this? Well, your teen needs to ask. All right. Like, teachers, schools have different policies. Like your middle schooler versus your kiddo in college might have very different experiences during a quiz, during a final, during just say a unit test. And if we're talking like the SAT, ACT, some standardized test, yeah, talking, getting out of the seat, not going to be allowed. Like totally different experience. But the question is, how strict is that no talking rule when we're talking college, when we're talking high school? Is your teen even allowed to ask questions? These are things that your child needs to know before the test. All right. If he shows up and has a question and he doesn't know, am I supposed to sit and raise my hand? The teacher comes to me, or am I allowed to get up out of my seat and go talk to the teacher? Like, these are things that your teen can easily find out before test day. And these are the things we want your child to find out before test day. When I make this suggestion, when I teach this test taking strategy of talking to the teacher, a lot of teens push back. A lot of them tell me, you're not allowed to ask questions. A lot of them tell me, I'm already supposed to know the material. Like, I'm supposed to know what's going on the test. And the truth of the matter is, if your child is confused, like doesn't know what the question's asking, doesn't know what a definition is of a word in the question, or maybe in one of those answer choices, your child needs to talk to the teacher. Like, why should your teen sit there confused if the question doesn't make sense? So totally fair game for your child to ask for clarification, because unfortunately, sometimes there are bad test questions. And if the teacher gets that same question from multiple kids in that class, or maybe different students over different class periods, well, hopefully that teacher's going to go, okay, I should throw out that question because it obviously didn't make sense. Maybe I didn't teach it the way I thought I did. Or it could be just that it's so convoluted, that answer choice, that teens are confused. So your child needs to ask for clarity. Now, if we're talking finals specifically, finals can be cumulative, right? That means everything that your child's learned in that semester, maybe if it's a 2-part class, that whole entire year, your child might be expected to know that information backwards and forwards and then apply it to the test. But yet, if we're talking, okay, your child's taking that test for chapter 4, am I supposed to use information just from chapter 4 or everything that's been taught? All right, I gotta tell you, for me as a straight A student, for me as someone who loved to learn, who still likes to learn, I overthought on tests. I still sometimes overthink a lot. And sometimes that can be a bad thing on a test. So that's another reason your team to talk to the teacher is what information am I supposed to use? If we know what the teacher is really asking in that question, like the question makes sense, so we don't need clarity, we don't need definitions. But now the question is, do you want me thinking like this? Do you want me to go this direction? Like sometimes when your child talks to the teacher during a test, your teen can really think through, where am I supposed to go with this? What's the direction? What were you, again, kind of really asking, but then also find out from the teacher, what piece of information do I need to use? So when your teen talks to the teacher, he can't just say, what's the answer, right? Like maybe sometimes that works, but that's not what I suggest. But when your child is trying to get that help with that final, trying to get that help with that multiple choice test, whatever we're talking about here, we want your teen to approach the teacher with respect, obviously, but then also making sure that your teacher, the teen's teacher, knows that your teen knows his stuff, right? There's a big difference between help me, I don't know what's going on, and do you mean this or this? Or, okay, I understand this, and so I'm good, I can get to this. I know it's not answer choice B because of blah, 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 but I don't know how to choose between these two. That is fair game. Obviously, depends a little bit on your teen's relationship with the teacher. That can play a big role into how this whole conversation goes. Depends on the teacher, depends again on the school policies, but your teen can ask questions during the test. I highly recommend that your child does. Now, something to keep in mind is your child is talking during a test, right? So we talked about already, is that even allowed? Well, the next thing to think about is this going to help your child, hurt your child? Comes to distractions. So if your teen, is very auditory, because if you've been here for a while, I talk about the learning styles a lot, the visual, auditory, and kinesthetic. Auditory might be a distraction, but yet at the same time, your child could benefit from hearing his classmates' questions. I tell teens when I teach test taking strategies, hey, if you're confused on something, your classmate asks a question and then something the teacher says just suddenly clicks, you're like, oh my goodness, that's what it is. Like, use that extra help to your advantage. We've got to think about timing. We got to think about pacing. All right. A lot of tests, especially standardized tests, especially finals, are timed. And depending on the type of school your child goes to, and again, sometimes the level, middle school, high school, college, we've got to think about how much time does your teen have to take that test. Because we do not want your child raising his hand, waiting for help for 20 minutes, and then he's only got 30 minutes for the test. Like, that's not what we want to have happen. We also don't want your child to come to a question and go, I don't know the answer, better ask for help, and then just stay stuck there. All right, that's not what we want either. So your child needs to be purposeful when asking for help, needs to really plan it out. My rule of thumb is we want your teens to wait till the end of the test to ask those questions, like ask multiple questions at once as this test taking strategy. Other thing to think about, maybe your child isn't allowed to leave a seat. Maybe that teacher is kind of walking around the room or say helping another student. That's the perfect chance for your son or daughter to say, hey, while you're here, help me with number 4, please. So definitely encourage your teen to be very intentional and plan out when to ask questions. We don't want your teen out of his seat every 5 minutes with a question. So that's not at all what we're talking about here either. We don't want the teacher taking the test for your child. So your child hopefully is not going to ask a question about every question, but yet knowing it is okay to take time to ask questions. All right, just again, think about how many questions, how long is it going to take me to ask questions, and really build that into the plan for the testing as well. So we've covered a lot of reasons to take test taking strategies to the next level by asking teachers. So I want to know how likely you think your child is to do this. And if there's a strategy that you have found really helpful for your teen, I want to know about that too. But please remember, if your child is taking a test and he doesn't get it, he does not know what that teacher means by that question, doesn't have any idea where that question came from, talk to the teacher during the test. Because if every single student misses a certain question on a test, the teacher's going to know, okay, this didn't make sense. Okay, we must not have covered this. Why wait until the teacher's grading the test when something could be done during the test? All right, I've had more than one opportunity when I've been in a test, as a student, and the teacher's like, okay, everybody, like just pause and look at question 2. All right, question 2, think about this thing we talked about in class. Or sometimes even teachers will just say, skip question 10. If everyone's asking questions about 10, what's the point of that being on the test if everyone's confused? A lot of teachers will do that. They'll just throw out the question, or they'll just give everyone the answer. And I mean, if your kid misses that question, when the answer was given, it stakes, but at the same time, it's like, why was your teen paying attention? But anyway, do know your teen has to ask questions. I cannot say that this one strategy will help your teen ace his next test, right? Like that's not the only thing your child needs. Strategies will only get your child so far, but yet when your teen sits down and take that next test, those strategies are going to help your teen take that knowledge, that content he really does know, and do as well on the test as he can. But if he's never learned the content in the first place, strategies aren't the final solution. They're just part of the puzzle. They go together. So do know if you've got questions, you want some help for your teen when it comes to test prep. All right, if your child needs some more test taking strategies, because this is just one of 7 that I teach, and we haven't talked about test anxiety whatsoever, which is also something I cover in my test taking workshops, my test taking strategies, trial lessons. Those links are down below. So let's find out how we can help your teen have stress-free finals week. Let's help how you can know, wow, my child is really doing as well on test as I know he can. So check out those links down below so your teen can do much better on that next test with the right strategies. Have a great day, mamas. Thanks for listening in, and we'll see you in the next video. Bye, mamas.